All right, good morning and welcome to 12 Days in the Disciplines. And this is, of course, our last day, which is kind of sad. I hope you've enjoyed this journey as much as I have. So I'm taking this time to take questions on the disciplines for those of you who haven't had the benefit of having maybe your own questions answered. But I'm going to start today with a few of the questions that have already come in throughout the week as we solicited them. I'm assuming these disciplines should become a natural part of our life. Like habits that we naturally do. Having heard that it takes around 30 days to develop a habit, would it be wrong to attempt to schedule them until they become habits, or should they just grow from the heart? Should a particular amount of time be set aside for each discipline to help ingrain them as habits? And how often should we be attempting to practice each discipline? Daily, weekly, monthly, etc. Again, this is really a great question. I was really hoping that somebody would ask this question so that I would have occasion to answer it. I've actually entitled this session Habituation. And habituation is really the ingraining or developing of things that we want to be able to do all the time. So first things first, there is a natural cooperation between us and our will and our spirit and God's spirit. And this is how spiritual growth happens. All spiritual growth happens is through this cooperation between the Spirit's work and our work. So all the time we should be expecting that the Holy Spirit will be leading, prompting, guiding us to do things. And then with our own will, we cooperate with the Holy Spirit. So this is how I understand it. Even if the disciplines are something that we schedule, even if it's something that we're doing only as an act of gratitude or something that we've wanted to do for a long time, I don't think you can actually go wrong practicing the disciplines. I think as long as your motive is right, God will honor you. Oswald Chambers, I read My Utmost for His Highest back in the early days of my Christian walk. It was like a 365-day devotional, and OC became one of my heroes. He said this, he said, if you want to know God's will for your life, trust God and do the next thing. Trust God and put one foot in front of the other. And this is how I would go about practicing the disciplines. I would listen to the Holy Spirit, listen to my own heart and life, try to choose what freedom I would like to have that a discipline can bring me, and then just go ahead and put it into practice and play with it and enjoy it and get through the rough patches, because with every discipline there's going to be some drudgery. There's going to be some days that you're going to attend to it and you're not going to want to do it. And in these times, it's not wrong if you're not experiencing like an overwhelming sense of God's presence, or if you feel like you're just going through the motions. That is a very natural part of practicing Christian disciplines. And sometimes we just need to push through it until it becomes habitual and a normal part of our life. Tim Keller said this, he said, if the God of the Bible exists, and there is a true reality beneath and behind this one, and this life is not the only life, and these are things that are deep to the core of our being, he says, then every good endeavor, even the simplest ones pursued in response to God's calling, can matter forever. My next piece of advice is to decide on the why before the what. Now, the disciplines, as we've said, correspond to the freedoms that we want to have. So, for example, if we find that it's the things that are around us and the complicated schedule and the hurry of our life that's causing us pain, that's causing us to feel like we're separated from God or separated from abundant life, that might be a great time in your life to practice the discipline of fasting, the discipline of simplicity, or the discipline of service, because all of those things can liberate us from the self-centeredness that causes that kind of bondage to things or to schedules or to hurry, or even to our own obsession with our own growth or our own progression. So again, it's helpful to think about what the freedom is that you're trying to get before you start to practice a discipline. And I would say this too, disciplines are best practiced in community. So if you're part of a church, there are likely people who would love to gather with you and to not only help you with things like accountability, but even to play with some of these disciplines together. I know that during my own spiritual growth, having mentors was a huge part of that for me, because there were times when I didn't know what I should be doing in my spiritual walk. Like when I first started reading the scriptures, for example, I didn't know where to go. I would just start reading cover to cover, and there are times I get bogged down in details and genealogies. I was only 12 years old when I began, and my grandmother was one of my mentors. And I remember Nan saying to me, Jeremy, what do you enjoy? What do you love reading about? And I told her, Well, here's a 12-year-old boy answer. I love reading about war stories. I love action and fighting and adventure. And Nan said, well, why don't you start in the books of Joshua and Judges? Because those books are full of the things that you enjoy reading about. And that actually catalyzed my love for the scriptures. So having a trusted mentor, friends, accountability partners, spiritual director, coach, things like that, people to practice in community with, can help to direct us in the disciplines and also keep the joy in front of us. I know there are a group of people being led right now in the discipline of Bible journaling. I don't know if you've ever seen this before. It's kind of like Bible reading meshed with scrapbooking. And my friend Joy Baker, I know, actually teaches some of this stuff. And I've seen the kind of things they produce when they're in community and the kind of conversations that are catalyzed by Bible journaling. And I highly recommend this practice to anyone who wants to take it on. And I'm sure Joy wouldn't mind me recommending her as somebody to reference if you wanted to get into that, especially if you enjoy scrapbooking. All right. Okay, one last thing about practicing in community. Make sure that you pick mature, humble people. And above all, stay away from people who appear to be overly spiritual. I had a disciple once tell me that he felt nervous around people who he perceived to be really spiritual. And I gave him this piece of advice. I said, the most spiritual people you'll ever meet will probably be the people who you're most relaxed around. People who feel like they're unhurried, that they're not concerned with what other people think about them. They're just consumed with what Jesus thinks about them. So not the people who practice a miserable holiness or people who seem like they're always about doing. The people who are probably practicing the disciplines really well, who would make really great mentors, are people who are very much in tune with what it means to be a human being, and people who are more obsessed with, again, just being in the presence of God and being with Him and being with other people. People who make you feel like you're the most important people in the room are probably the most spiritual people. All right, here's another excellent question. They said, how does a person stay disciplined and not lose focus? And they said, I pretty much know the answer, but it's really hard to do this at certain phases of life. So here's the thing. All of us struggle with this, just right out front. There are none of us who don't lose focus when we're practicing the disciplines. But I would say this. If you're chasing balance, that's probably part of the problem. Balance is elusive. Balance is almost impossible to achieve in life, but it is possible to have rhythm. And if you read the way of Jesus in the Gospels, you'll find this, that Jesus would spend extended amount of times doing ministry, healing people, teaching, and then he would get away and he would retreat and he'd spend time with the Father. And then every now and then he'd spend time with just a close circle of friends. And then there were times when he would get alone with one or two people. And he would spend time serving and teaching the lost and being partying and celebrating with tax collectors and sinners as well. So balance probably isn't the best thing to chase. Chase after rhythm. And do the things that you feel like your heart needs the most. Like if you're spending a lot of time around people, if you're spending a lot of time in community, it might be a good time to retreat and practice silence and solitude. Or if you're at a point in your life where you're trying to make difficult decisions, you're seeking after God's will for a big moment like a move or a job, or you're just trying to find the next phase, maybe seeking your guidance and spiritual direction and gathering with a group of people who can help you to discern would be a good idea. So again, the disciplines aren't like we have to have them all in tension and be balancing all of them like a person spinning plates. The disciplines are something that we're supposed to be practicing in rhythm as they're healthy and good for us and for our life. And I want to say this to community. Thank you for all the encouragement over this. It hasn't been easy. Reading a chapter, practicing a discipline, recording a video, editing a video, moderating a discussion, all in the midst of one workday. So I appreciate your patience with me as I've gone on this journey, and also for those who helped me to develop my video skills and being in front of the camera. I especially owe a debt of gratitude to David Kenty for setting up this whole video setup for me and teaching me how to do this in the comfort of my own home during this COVID crisis. Well, family, it's been great journeying with you. Oh, Luann, I've got a question I haven't answered from you. How can we be the church during this whole COVID crisis, submitting to the government regulations but still serving our communities? Have I got that right? I think that's it. If it wasn't, that is definitely a question that came in that I forgot about. So make sure that I address that one. Okay, so yes, submission during this whole COVID crisis means submitting to our government. It means not gathering. It means limiting our contact with other people. But here's the thing, I've been watching, I had this opportunity being in Formission to watch churches all across our province and see what they're doing in their communities. And there's so much more happening than just churches going online. And I'm so proud of our pastors who've done the very challenging thing, for some of them getting video equipment, learning to be in front of a camera like I have, and doing church. That's been awesome. But I've also seen churches doing so many great things in their community. There's one church, actually a number of churches, that were delivering groceries to people who are in need, reaching out, creating community groups as well, where they can have discussion and people can talk about things like neighboring. I've seen kids groups doing stained glass windows and messages of encouragement. I've seen youth ministries doing Zoom calls and helping youth with anxiety and some of the things that come along with being in a time of crisis. So the church definitely is still being the church. One of the practices that we've engaged, I think, can be really helpful when it comes to balancing submission with service during this time is the discipline of guidance, or the discipline of discernment. So if you've been wondering, what can we do as a church during this time that'll be meaningful for our community, that's more than just having a service, talk to your pastor, of course, and make sure that you're providing them an opportunity to engage and to gather people. But I think one of the things the Spirit is saying to us during this time is that the church is so much more than an institution or an organization. It's an organism. And I think the Spirit has provided this time as a gift for us so that we can start getting back to some of the organic things, like gathering in community, like discerning, like asking the Spirit in groups of 3 or 4, or even Christians from across the province gathering together and saying, hey, what can we do? Maybe financially to help somebody else. What can we do to encourage somebody else or to create something? And the Spirit is doing a lot of really cool serendipitous things through this as well. Vision doesn't always have to come from the pastor or from the board or the church leadership. And some of the best moments I had during ministry were times when me and my senior pastor would be praying, God, lay something on somebody's heart. This vision that we've had to be an upward, inward, outward church. While we're preaching that, we just pray the people in the congregation would grab onto it and the Holy Spirit would plant things in their heart that they can do to reach their communities so that we can equip them to serve. And some of the best moments I had in ministry were not when me or the senior pastor came in and said, hey church, we're going to gather and organize, here's something we can do. But when somebody would come to us and say, hey, we've been listening to the journey in the Word and we've been hearing your heart, pastor, and here's what we feel the Holy Spirit has laid on our heart. How can you help to equip us to do this? How can you help us to gather people so that we can do this really well? So I encourage you, if God has been stirring things in your heart, your pastor would most likely be very delighted that you've been listening to the Word and that the Holy Spirit has been germinating and creating things in your own heart as well. Did I answer that question okay? I hope so, Luann. If not, I'll give another run at another time. But this is what I hear the Spirit saying to us during this time as I've been doing my own individual discernment. And I'm sure many of you will echo that sentiment as well. We're so much more than an organization. We're an organism. It has been my joy as the Formission Director to help to, cultivate discipleship in our churches and help our pastors and equip them to do discipleship really well in their own context. One more thing. If this is a study that you'd like to do in your own community, I've mentioned it already. I'm going to have these things put up on YouTube and as a course format if you wanted to do it individual or with a small group. Great idea to tune in, gather with a group of people after this whole COVID is after, or gather with your family now and do this practice in the disciplines. Or you could even create your own Facebook group and use this content for a course if you'd like to go online with a group of people and study and gather. All right, until the next time, grace and peace, family. I'm going to see if I can figure out how to end this live video.